quiet. Independent English learning at home.
Good evening, Kavibal, and welcome to our Learn at Home live learning session. For tonight's discussion, our topic would be on independent English learning at home. Before we begin, take note of the following reminders. Make sure you are registered to the webinar to have your e-certificate of participation. Visit certificate.vibalgroup.com to generate your proof of attendance. Place your questions on the comment box allotted during the session, and they will be addressed by our speaker later on. Share the video using hashtag LearnAsOnePH as our official hashtag to our Vibal webinars. Experience learning, Kavibal. And now, to proceed with our session this evening, It is my pleasure to introduce to you our distinguished speaker. He is one of the top 10 reading and preschool specialists in the Philippines and is a sought after resource speaker, lecturer, and consultant to various seminars and conferences here and abroad. He has written various books, modules, let review materials for Philippine Normal University and for other colleges and universities all over the country. He graduated with the Bachelor of Early Childhood Education degree, cum laude, and a certificate in reading specialization, recipient of Service and Leadership Award. He received his Master of Arts in Teaching with specialization in reading at the Philippine Normal University, outstanding reading graduate. He took his doctoral degree in reading education at the Philippine Normal University and took doctoral in English Studies units at the University of Santo Tomas, Manila. And now, he's finishing another doctoral degree in curriculum and instruction at the Philippine Normal University, Manila. He is currently an education consultant to multiple institutions, including Vibal Group Incorporated. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our speaker for tonight, Brother Roderick Aguirre, PhD.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Um, it has been a week, I suppose, that I haven't had an FB live. I've been with the YouTube channel of the Vibal, talking about preschool education and other strategies that we can help our learners, the young learners, proceed with their learning in the new normal with the K to 12 program, with of course with the MLCs during the pandemic year. But before I begin, I would like to give a shout out to the following people, of course. First, to the members and unwavering support and organization of organizing this kind of platforms from the Eduk Services of Ibal, headed by Sara Sunga. Of course, Orosio, with Anne, of course, Anne Sevilla, and my moderator, Kia. Shout out to Miss Grace Sheila Rama Madriaga, to Abraham Kyle Robien Cases, Mary Ann Ramos Boktil, um, Ma'am Shelo Valenzuela from Benedictine Institute of Learning, to Rena Marie, to Tobias Gregorio, and to all those who are watching right now. I'm reading, there are a lot of, I think it's 1.7 thousand already that is already tuned in and watching our 1 hour webinar on independent learning of the English language. So let me share to you first my PowerPoint presentation before I proceed. So here's what we're gonna do tonight. So I'll be explaining in short and in a more concise way of how we can help our students come up with their own self-directed and independent learning of English at home, and what are the most practical ways we can come up with of course with the involvement of the parents, so that our learners become more proficient in the use of the language, both in oral and written form. And of course, I will show you a mini workshop, which I will do, and I will show it to you via my screen, how we can come up with a schedule and how we can come up with a quarter plan so that we can help our students realize the learning competencies prescribed by the Department of Education by the MLCs, but also making sure that transfer of learning of the English language from the MLC, from the modules, from the online materials to whatever they're doing at home, from the morning they wake up to the evening and prepare for bed. So these are the things that we're going to think about, how we can help our students become more confident and more disciplined and more self-propelling in learning English at home. All right. So it is more of this session, short session is more of maximizing learning modules and home experiences in learning English as a second language. So my premise here is that teachers out there already came up with modules that the learners will be using at home. And then there will be supplementary materials via videos, via audio files, and via online feed, so that there will be platforms for students to use English, not just when they are reading or when they are using the modules, but also in ways that they can use English in conversing with the other members of the family. So let me begin with a quotation that I usually use when I do trainings. So let me read this to you. Language learning must approximate the natural way a language is acquired. Natural, I say natural way a language is acquired, that is through making learners use the language, both in oral and written in various language demands and in social context. So what I'm trying to say here is that we want our students to learn English language in an informal way because they're learning that at home. And by doing that, we are one way or the other making a natural approach to the language learning in an acquisition perspective. All right. A good example would be when you are watching, say, an English movie. After that, do you take a test? Or after listening to the radio or listening to an English song or to a song per se, do you take a test, a quiz afterwards? Or you reflect about what message you got from the movie, what made you feel good, and so on and so forth. So when we create materials to support the learning of our students of the English language, we must approximate a natural way of activities after a learning experience. Remember, this is informal. This is not a formal setup where if you have guide questions, if you have quizzes afterwards, teachers can ask students to check exchange papers and check it, and then students immediately get to have a feedback of the results of their comprehension check, perhaps of the literature read or watched. But remember, this is at home, so we would like to make sure that students are still learning English, but having fun at the same time and approximating that it is learned in a more natural setup. So here's what we're going to answer tonight. What is self-directed or independent language learning? Next, what are the roles of educators and parents in supporting learners' self-directed independent learning of the English language? Okay, so more often than not, in the natural setup where we teach English to our students at school, they speak English inside the classroom, but when they go outside the classroom, they no longer, they stop using the English language, probably with reasons that they get bullied when they mispronounce some certain words or mispronounce certain words, or when they go home, their older siblings laugh at their efforts in using the English language and putting a stop to the practice of the English language. Now, with this situation that we have right now, we can now support the transfer of learning of English in a formal way to how it's used at home. All right, we'll come up with practical ways how we can do that. Then what are strategies best promote independent English language study and learning at home? And then after that, I'll show you a little bit of workshop, how we can utilize certain modules that are already available out there, make it as a backbone of our discussion and of our schedule, and then what activities we can incorporate in the schedule that can support the modules, because modules alone cannot suffice in the learning of the English language. It could probably help our students in their thinking process using the language, but remember, they must be able to orally use the language and then in written form as well. And finally, once I'm done with the mini workshop, I will entertain questions from you guys out there. And of course, my moderator, Kia, will select through the questions and then I'll answer them as best and as honest as I can based on my experiences though. And of course, I'll give you conclusions and implications afterwards. So let us begin. So one way what we can do is that we can maximize the different parts of the house to make sure that English language is utilized. So since we are using multilingual approach in learning language, my suggestion for the parents would be label all parts. So educators out there, you need to advise the parents that all things found in their house, the parts of the house must be labeled. And since look at my example here, it's a labeling of different parts of the house, but the labeling is wrong because these are not proper names. So it should be all lower cases, correct? And then at the same time, students, when they see the words, teachers and perhaps the parents can also model how the words are pronounced, like attic, all right? And then part of the well, we don't have attics, although some houses here in Cavite they have attics too. And under the bedroom, perhaps we can label like the pillows, lampshades, doors, which facilitate oral reading and written and speaking at the same time, without making it more of a formal learning of the English language. Another one that I remember that I did for some of my students when I was teaching in the early grades, I oriented the parents that they have this words, and then in 1 month they place the labels in the different parts and equipment and tools and appliances in the different places of the house, and then they orient their kids on what does it mean, the words, how it's pronounced, and so on and so forth. And then after a month, what they did is they took the words and then stashed it, piled it one top over the other, and then they will ask the kids to get one word, say it, and then after saying the word, if it's correct, then they're supposed to stick it on the object, the appliance, or the tool that exactly means that word. All right, so it's a simple way of doing language learning at home. But of course, we have to ask the parents and encourage the parents to speak English at home as well. But we're not saying that's all the time, but they can come up with a schedule that they will use English. Like I remember my mom when I'll be using my examples though. Like she would address, again, this is not the same as the experience that my brothers experience. My mom would usually bring me to her work. I'm the youngest, so some of my my three brothers, older brothers, would be at school already while I would be at home. So my mom would usually bring me to her workplace, and then at workplace she would speak to me in English. That's probably one of the reasons why at a very young age I was predisposed to learning English language, and I'm more comfortable using English than any other language in the Philippines. I know what I know Bisaya, but I'm more conversant in English language, probably because at a very young age, my mom exposed me to the English language. And probably I wasn't ashamed of using the English language at a very young age because I grew up with it. Now, we need to help our kids to approximate the idea that they own the language instead of thinking that they just borrow the language, they're practicing it. And then if they made mistakes and errors in using the language, their brothers and parents would laugh at them. So we need to orient them that laughing at the attempts of children using the language is definitely not acceptable. There must be positive support in the use of the English language at home. There will be no other place in using the English language. When you go outside, you cannot expect 100% that your kids and even the members of the family will speak English in the market, in the malls, and so on and so forth. But what we can do is make sure that the English language is utilized as a medium of interaction, no longer as instruction, more so of an interaction. Okay, now let's now answer the first question. What is self-directed or independent language learning? So it is simply put that English or self-directed or independent language learning is also referred to as autonomous learning, self-directed learning, independent study, and self-regulated learning, meaning students are the one following the schedule of accomplishing the activities while using the English language at the same time. Next would be, it is an approach where learners develop an awareness of their strengths and weaknesses by interacting with their environment, like the teacher, online, feedback from the group chats or audio files that you're going to provide them with. And then of course, it also is an awareness activity that allows learners to set learning goals, identify learning needs, and evaluate their own progress. So in a way, it helps students to know where they're at in learning the English language, not more so in focusing so much on the formal way of learning grammar per se. Although grammar should be part of it, but it has to be situated in certain situation. Like if your child is telling a story that took place, what he did or she did, that took place probably a day before, you can probably, it's a good learning opportunity to teach your child past tense of the verb. All right, something like that. I'll give you an example in a while though. So we're clear now. So it's a self-directed students, independent learning of the English language or any language for that matter, be it Filipino, mother tongue, it's still the same principle that we follow. Remember, they're at home, definitely they will be independent, meaning they should have a schedule. So if you still have a question on how to make the schedule, I think I already had a session on positive discipline through home schedule. You may want to go back to that feed, I think 2 weeks ago. So here's a question. Second question. What are the roles of educators and parents in supporting self-directed, independent learning of the English language? All right. So here are the roles of the educators in supporting the learners independent. Number one, you educators right now are no longer just teachers or just educators. You are now advisors. All right, advisor in a sense that you help students choose certain materials that would fit their own strengths and weaknesses. Like some of them probably are not yet readers. So if they are not yet good readers and have problems with reading, you may want to ask the child, sorry to shift the, well, it's in English though. You may want to ask the child, I know that you're having difficulty reading the module because we will be prescribing modules. So if you have difficulty reading the materials, especially the literature, the stories in the module, we have an audio file that comes with it that you can listen to it while reading the audio file. So it's a support. So I'm suggesting to the teachers out there, if you have modules and where students are going to learn independently, read independently some of the activities that they're going to answer, it would be nice that there would be an audio file that comes with it, and parents can download that to the cell phones perhaps or the laptops, and then while the students are reading, say, the book, they are listening while they are following in the module. And it helps the students also learn and acquire certain level of fluency. So they're learning to listen, they're learning also to read, and they're also learning to respond to literature and to the learning activities that you have indicated in the module. Please, it will be too much for the students to be alone reading the module using their own level of proficiency in the English language. They are still struggling even in Filipino, and now you are making them too independent in reading and understanding the modules in English. Not to mention also online feed. There must be what we call as teacher support. So advisor as a teacher, educators as advisor, is that one way or the other, you introduce ideas to the students, to the parents, as to how can they maximize the learning materials. So only that, on the other hand, if you suggest something, it means you have to do it. If you say an audio file, you'll have to read a material. Example, in this module, there is in the Smart Class English 4, it says here that they're supposed, in the learning competency from the MLCs, students are supposed to read a story, understand the elements of the story, the theme, the plot, the characters, and so on and so forth. So say these, look, it's too wordy for grade 4 students, but this is readability wise, this is appropriate for grade 4. Therefore, to support this, there must be an audio file that would come with the module so that they can play it and listen to it. So teachers would record it like this. The title of the story is How Rice Came to Be. Long time ago, there lived a widow named Rosa. together with her young son named Bagas, in a well-kept nipa hut far away from a rather vast mountainous village. Since birth, Bagas had never seen his father, one of the best hunters the chieftain ever had. If you read with an audio file, if you have the modules, especially the stories, and you have an audio file, students have which we have now, our next support. You become a mentor, a model of how English language is used in oral and written form. You cannot expect students to know exactly when the process would come in, would go up, and so on and so forth. And I had a session on read aloud protocols in intonation, which would change the meaning. If students will be reading on their own and they have different junctures in some of the sentences, meaning will be compromised as well. Therefore, audio files and supports will be best for independent learning. I think what I'm trying to point out here is that even if we are making our students become more independent in the learning of the English language at home, still there is a huge responsibility of educators in supporting the independent learning of students. Now, say, if I'm a student who was already a high proficiency level of the English language, I'm a grade 4 student, and I have a high proficiency of the oral use of the English language, I don't have to use the audio file anymore. But remember, you cannot disregard the mere fact that some of your students have problems with following the stories. So you have to make supports like audio file and videos as a support to the learning of your students. All right. So it doesn't mean that they're learning independently, that you just leave them on their own. Next would be is appraiser. Appraiser, I know that this is more of a different side of being an assessor. So as an assessor, you have probably used formative assessment and summative assessment to evaluate the students' performance in their progress in the learning of the English language via the acquisition and the learning of the learning competencies. Here is that you have to be supportive, even if students have during video conferencing, and you encourage them to speak and some students would mispronounce certain words or it's ungrammatical, you still praise them. Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that statement. So instead of correct them directly, you probably may want, oh, you mean, say the child said, I went to the toilet. Yeah, I went to the market and accompanied my mom to buy. So "wented" was wrong. So I think the child overgeneralized the use of ed in making verbs and transforming verbs into past form. My point here is that instead of that was wrong, identify the word that was ungrammatical and then correct it. Now, instead of doing that, be appraiser. Very good. So you went with your mother to the market and you accompanied her. So by repeating the statements, and making them hear how it is properly said with the grammatical form, they are indirectly learning it. And still, it is in a more natural way, all right? And finally, the last one that we need is the collaborator, okay? Now, one of the things that we need as teachers, I don't know if that can be done with our situation right now, but I think what's important is that at least have a one-on-one situation with students, because the language level of proficiency of students vary from one student to another. So probably you may want to pay more attention to students who are struggling so much, and then perhaps come up with a schedule that where you do remediation or correction to the students. So I know that during classes, you can identify students already during classes. You can identify students who are struggling so much. And then during probably collaborative work or independent work, you approach the child and give more attention and more time to give support to those students. And you must do that too in online format. So if there is an online, say, during your making of the schedule, you may want to ask the parents to allot probably 30 minutes or an hour every night before they go to sleep, study time. I'll show you an example of a home schedule that I created. And then you may want to come up with that, similar home scheduling. So these are the four most important roles that educators can do to support the learners. No more being too rigid with the use of the English language. Be an advisor. You plan and suggest to the students what they need to do. Mentor, meaning you become an exemplar of how language is used. And then appraiser, you always praise the child and directly correct them by modeling to them how the language is used and appropriately in different contexts. And then of course collaborator by being with the students even if you're not physically present, at least have certain one-on-one connection with the students via online video conferencing at a certain time outside of course the schedule of your classes. Now let's move on to the responsibilities of the parents or roles of the parents in supporting the learner's independent language learning. Of course, number one. So if the teacher's responsibility, first responsibility is to be an advisor, the first responsibility of parent is to be a language scaffold. Early on, I mentioned that the parents must come up with creative ways how to use to come up with social situations and activities and experience at home where they can encourage their children to use English. A good example would be if you have board games at home, like when I was growing up, I used to play Monopoly, Millionaires. Not that we had those board games. Our neighbor, the Villas, Cheryl Villas, Noemi Villas. We would have some Saturday morning or afternoon. They would borrow a board game from their aunts, and then we're going to play the board game. We didn't really actually use English all throughout, but the words there are cards there, game cards that are in English. The labels are in English, so one way or the other, we are learning the language in a fun way. So we can do that by utilizing board games. Or I remember when I was in I was in grade 4, and all of a sudden my English teacher in Divine Word University brought her a jackstone, and then said, "We're going to learn how to speak English by learning by playing jackstone." So could anyone explain to us how a jackstone is played? So a classmate of mine, I'm not gonna mention the name, classmate of mine said that to play the jackstone, you have how many stones you have, and then you have a ball. You need to bounce the ball and so on. So because we know how to play the game, one way or the other, we're now able to explain it confidently in the English language. And then sometimes for lack of words in the English language, we stumble over our explanation. Hence, our teacher is there to support by supplying us with the appropriate words. Now at home, since students are learning and using English at home and the teachers are not present, and the teachers cannot necessarily be there physically and supply the needed and appropriate word that students are grasping for to proceed with their explanation or whatever they are explaining or telling the parents. The parents can provide a scaffold by listening to the students listening to their children use the English language. And if they struggle with a certain word you can ask, the parents can ask them like, what do you mean in Filipino? Anong gusto mong sabihin yan sa Filipino? Anong ibig sabihin mo yan sa waray? Waray? Anong ibig sabihin mo yan gusto mong sabihin sa Cebuano or any mother tongue for that matter? And then the parents would say, oh, you mean, all right? So the scaffold there is that the parents would be the ones who will help the child transition from their mother tongue use of the language to the English language, or Filipino to English language. I know that there are a lot of families out there that are parents and even older siblings that are struggling with English too. So if that's the case, wow, that would be a tremendous effort on the parents in providing language scaffold to probably not no scaffold at all. Hence, the more if parents cannot pose as language scaffold at home, then there will be more responsibilities for the parents to create more materials to help the students use the English language, both oral and written form. All right. Now, likewise with the teachers, parents are also mentors. Like when they're cooking, perhaps dinner or cooking breakfast, what they can do is while they're cooking, they speak English. Like, okay, today for breakfast, I am going to cook rice. So here's what you're going to do: get a glass, all right, get a glass, a drinking glass, and then get 3 cups of rice and pour it into the whatever the basin that they're going to use for cooking and so on and so forth. And the parents would probably come up with other activities that they can utilize and then have an experience by using the English language. Again, the problem there if parents also have low confidence level in the use of the English language, that would that would really be a huge problem. But we need to encourage them to at least encourage children to speak in English. And if they cannot support it, they could just probably yeah, that's good, probably support by becoming more of a praiser too. So one thing that we need to tell our parents is that to always praise the children's effort, no matter how riddled with mistakes and errors their attempts in the use of the English language, to always praise, very good that you were able to speak in English, even if it was ungrammatical. Still praise the child. It would boost their confidence, and it will give them the signal that they're in the right path and they will continue doing the activity at home. And finally, collaborator though. So probably what we can do is that the parents can sit down with their children, like when they're watching television, they can probably talk about it, like when they're watching Kingdom. I think you've watched Kingdom. Watch Kingdom, perhaps it's in Korea, but there's in Korean, but there's subtitled in English. You could probably discuss about. So what do you think? Do you agree with what the king with the with the prince decision to abandon blah 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 and so on and so forth? All right. So you can probably make an ordinary activity at home and use questions and converse in English, whatever activities you're doing. All right. So these are the 4 major roles of the parents in supporting the learner's independent language learning. Again, even if the students are supposed to be independently learning the English language, they still need a lot of support from the people surrounding them. It does not come out that students immediately become independent without any support from the people from the people at home and from the school. It is more challenging right now because kids will be at home. Teachers are not physically present, and the parents are left alone in supporting their kids' English language learning. Now, what strategies promote independent English language study and learning? So these are some of the strategies though. One design that we have for the Department of Education and in the K-12 program, which is of course articulated in the MELC, would be literature-based language instruction. So teachers out there, you need to design your materials using the literature-based language instruction. So let's define literature-based language instruction. It means literature-based language instruction is the type of instruction in which author's original narrative and expository works are used as the core for experiences to support children in developing literacy. Meaning, instead of focusing so much on the grammar, we still ask our students to listen to or read or watch literature. It could be a science literature, a math literature, an araling panipunan literature, which is probably social science because it's in English, or perhaps a literary piece. And then from there, we can ask them to understand elements of the chosen literary piece or literature that we ask them to listen or view and read. And then we extract grammar points. All right. So, so these are the text types though. The literary, we have the narrative, poetry, and drama. And we have factual, we have the recount, the explanation, discussion, exposition, procedure, response, and information report, which are well articulated in the MELCs. So later on, I'll be showing to you how we can accommodate the literature-based language instruction approach to our planning of the modules and the online materials. All right. So our premise in creating, in exposing our kids different literary texts or literature would be literary text and informational text. From kinder, there will be higher percentage of exposure to literary text because our students are more, Philippine context, I mean, Filipinos are more predisposed to stories, okay, than from informational texts. But as they move from one grade up to the grade levels, they must be gradually introduced to informational text because they'll be facing lots of reading, lots of text from science, from math, from TLE, and all other subject areas where there would be few literary selections. All right. So that's just the paradigm of exposure, the percentage of exposure to the different types of texts. All right. So these are the things that we need to consider in doing literature-based language instruction as an approach, as a strategy in supporting the independent learning of our students through the design of the module. First, doing the authentic things with the literature. Doing authentic things with the literature means talking and reflecting about it. Just imagine when you, after watching a movie in cinemas, what do you do? What do you do afterwards? Do you take a test? No, you don't. Do you have a recitation? No, you don't. In a natural setting, what you do is that you talk about the most memorable event in the movie that struck you most. So I think one of the first, if you're going to ask students to talk about the literature, you may want to ask them which of talk about the most memorable event in the story read or in the literature viewed, something like that. Instead of having multiple choice afterwards, making it more of a quiz thing. All right. Next, giving language support to students. I think that would be clear, like talking about it. So I'm suggesting that there should be collaborative activities, like you come up with a chat group for students so that they can use the English language within the age group. So it would be nice. More often than not, the proficiency level of the English language teacher poses as a threat to the students because students feel that they cannot live up to the expectations of their teachers. Reason being is that the teachers are, more fluent in the use of the English language, and they feel like they're, pressured to be on that level. So it would be nice if we have activities in the modules or online activities where students are grouped according to however you group them. Probably those are good, and then some who are not so good, group them together, and then have a group chat so that they can, practice chatting. That will be reading and writing at the same time, and then probably a video conference that they can collaboratively do to accomplish the performance task, and that's practicing their listening speaking. So giving language support to students is very important. And finally, we have developing literacy, reading, and writing. So it's important that at the end of the module, you ask your students to transfer what they have acquired in the literature and, skills and book grammar apart from the literature, and somehow ask them to write and perform something, of similar literature. Okay, let me get out of this. Let's see. Let me get out of this of my PowerPoint, and I'll show you an example of a schedule. All right. So this is an example of a schedule, daily schedule. Say the schedule that say I am the teacher, the English grade 4 teacher, English, the grade 4 teacher of and then I sat down with the student, not necessarily, physically, but sat down via online conferencing with the parents, sat down that this is the schedule for the learners. Observe that I indicated here schedules at home and the schedules for learning. The white ones are scheduled for learning the subjects, while the green ones and other colors are activities at home. When we come up with sample education learning plan or schedule for our students at home, we must incorporate the schedule for home activities and for learning activities. It cannot be a schedule that is pure learning activities. There must be other activities where students can breathe and be who they are at home, but at the same time, utilizing all of these home activities to use English language in their various tasks and chores. A good example would be, say, from 6 o'clock to 7:30 in the morning. This is hypothetical, okay? Hypothetical schedule. They would have personal household chores. Say that morning, I think the child has a schedule of sweeping the floor in the sala perhaps, and then they could probably listen to a music, an English music, an English song, and so on and so forth. And then they will have from 7:30 and prepare for their learning sessions. From 7:30 to 8 o'clock, we will now have preliminary activities, perhaps preparing the materials, looking at the schedule, what would be the first schedule, and so on and so forth. And then 8 o'clock to 9:40, 50 minutes, I suppose, would be science. I indicated an icon which shows that it is a computer-based or probably an online activity for the students. And then math online, and then English would be modular, right? So be 1:32 to 2:20 p.m. So this schedule, and then perhaps we have, as we go down to 6 o'clock to 7 p.m., we include exercise. I mean, hypothetically, the parents would like their kids to do exercise at least an hour a day. Well, we should encourage our kids to incorporate exercise in their daily activities. And then we have personal time. Personal time perhaps would be whatever the kids would want to do. They can chat with their friends. And then this is a time where you encourage the parents to say, please encourage the kids to chat in English or to talk in English. And if they're watching, if they choose personal time here on Monday to watch television, and probably you may encourage them to watch an English channel, a channel with an English, use English language as, as their medium of interaction. Household chores again, dinner, you may want to ask them to speak in English or other language per se, but I'm not saying that all throughout would be English, because there will be other language also like Filipino that should be supported as well. So if you say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday would be English, all activities then will be fine. And then we have Tuesday and Friday would be Filipino, and then Saturday would be the language that they choose to use that they're comfortable with. Sunday would be also a language they choose that they're comfortable with. The point is, you allow them to choose. That's why it's called independent and self-directed. You give them a sense of choice. But remember, look, even if there's a sense of choice, it's already planned out. Only that the choice of what language to use in a certain day, in a certain hour, certain activity will be their choice. Once they say that should be the language I will be using on that day, on that hour, on that activity, then they'll have to stick with it. All right. And then, of course, if that's a schedule that the kids are comfortable with and they came up with, the parents and the teachers should support it. It should not be like at the school that you dictate that Monday to Thursday is an English speaking day, while Friday is a Filipino speaking day. You don't dictate. In the school, you can do that because it's a formal setup. But at home, kids must feel that that's their place and they have a say on what goes on. Okay. So let's have an example of grade 4 here. Sure. So I extracted all of this, the grade levels standards. I extracted this from the MELCs. And I have here my template. So we have week, most essential competencies, and the second column, activity, time allotment, mode of delivery, type of learning, schedule, and materials needed. A good example. So the red ones are the ones I added. Remember, the MLC briefer says that we can add what we think is more essential to support the learning of the students. In the MLCs of the Department of Education, it says identify the structure, purpose, and language features of narrative text. Now, I know that in the MELCs of the Department of Education, there is no language feature or grammar that supports the comprehension and understanding of narrative text. So I added past tense, although it could have been a lesson before that. So I could probably do here is more of a review. Why? Because narrative to support the learning and comprehension of narratives. So say I already placed the learning competence from the MLCs to this template. I want to say identify the structure and purpose and language features of narrative text. I would say this is under the component literature and comprehension. I would say 20 minutes listening to or watching the literature, and then it will be computer-based. Perhaps it's computer-based because it's pre-recorded. Like if it's a video where the teacher, reads aloud or tell the stories by storytelling and read aloud, it's pre-recorded so that the students could just click on it on the time they're supposed to watch it for 20 minutes. That's why I say teacher supervised on a Monday, 1:30 to 2 p.m., going back to the schedule that we created. And then after we'll have comprehension, 30 minutes video conference. The teacher will be online. So I could probably have here, materials needed would be Zoom, I think, Zoom link, okay? Or just a link. I don't want to impose it should always be Zoom. There will be other platforms though. So a link for the video conference. Video conference. All right. And then we move on to identify meanings of familiar word. That will be under skills. 50 minutes modular, meaning the teacher will not be there on Tuesday. It will be independent learning, all right? And the students will be listening. Will be reading the module, but as I've said, students who are struggling with reading must have an audio file to support their learning. So I would say that they will still access the audio file in their laptops or their cell phones while they read along with the audio file. So it's now an audio file pre-recorded by the teacher. It could be an explanation, perhaps. If there's a grammar, there's a skill that they need to focus, especially identifying words through structural analysis. They just orally read, like as if the students are listening to the teacher and the teacher is there. So the teacher is not necessarily there. All right. Then we have used past tense of the verb when we're telling the events in the story. I would say 50 minutes because it's more a review. So mode of the delivery would be modular. I would say modular again. And then I would say independent learning. This would be now Wednesday. And then the materials will be needed would be audio file. And then I would say module 1 page, okay? Module 1 page. I'll say I'm using Smart Class English, all right? Smart Class English. I would put here Smart Class English. And then let's look at the page. Number 2. That would be page 9 to page 11. Page 9 to 11. There you go. All right. So if you're supposed to come up with this kind of schedule for students for every subject area. Since we're just talking about English, I'll be giving you one example in English. And then this would be you are going to provide this. You finish that until the last week of the quarter, and you provide this to the parents so that the parents can support the independent learning of the students. It cannot be just yours. You need to show this curriculum plan to the parents so that they become your support, co-supporter in the independent learning of the students. Independent in the sense that kids have the choice what to do, at what time they do it, and so on and so forth. All right. A good example. What I'm trying to say here is that, hypothetically speaking, the student chose English. I mean, the grade 4 students chose English in the afternoon. It could also be that the grade 4 students chose English to be in the morning. Point is, you need to ask the grade 4 students to come up with the order of the subjects in the schedule. So all of this in reality should be blank, and then there should be orientation for the students, like orientation for the grade 4 students, but they should have one schedule. So they talk among themselves. No, let's have science first. So it's an opportunity for students to have more control on their schedule. All right. Now, if you want it to be more rigid, there's a possibility of less interest from the students. Remember, they're learning at home, and the teacher is not there. That would encourage them to open the book. They're on their own at home. So by doing the schedule and asking them, enlisting their support and their choice, they now have a more percentage of how do you call it, involvement in their learning process. All right. I think this is the mini workshop that I can come up with, and we go back to my PowerPoint presentation. All right. So in summary, the literature-based approach would be, you ask your students, the teacher will prepare a literature, whether it's oral, written, or trimedia, and which will be basis for teaching them to comprehend it. Although the comprehension learning content is already included in the MELCs, then you just have to rearrange, because they are not rearranged in such a way that it's literature comprehension. Sometimes there are lists of skills first and then in comprehension. So you have to rearrange the learning competencies based on this design. All right, comprehension skills. The skills could be listening skills, speaking skills, reading skills, writing skills, or viewing skills, depending on what's indicated in the MLCs. And then proceed to grammar. Again, the grammar. I noticed that there is inconsistent identification of grammar in Q1 of grade. Okay, and at this point, what you can do perhaps is just add support like tenses, I suppose, or a review. Since the first first 2 weeks of the quarter, you may want to review some of the grammar points in grade 2 and include that. Remember, align it to the other competencies in the Q1. You may add, okay? It's in the briefer. Next, you proceed to composition, and the composition would mean the same format as the literature. If the literature was in oral form, then the students must present or compose similar text, similar literature in oral form. If it's written, it's written. If it's trimedia, then trimedia, right? So consistency and parallelism should be considered. To summarize that part of our discussion, let's read this together. The types of activities done with the literature are the natural types of things children and adults would do in reading and responding to any good book. For example, it is natural to share and talk about a good book after reading it. It is not natural to answer 10 questions about the book. The teacher's role becomes one of planning and supporting authentic learning experiences. So when you come up with your online materials for English and for the module, activities for your modular instruction, think more natural activities than more formal. Why? Because the materials will be utilized at home where the teacher is not there. I keep on saying this over and over. Until you say enough. I'll be repeating this over and over because you are not present at home. And even if parents are not home, there's a high possibility that they cannot provide the kind of support that teachers can provide to the language learning of our students at home, all right? So, in fact, one of the most positive outcome of the pandemic, let's just see the positive side of what's happening right now, is that we can come up with opportunities today for out of class learning. So we can now ask students to use English outside the classroom, use English at home. So when they clean and then they, well, that's what I do when I go, like when I talk to myself in English. When I open a book, I tell myself, I think this book is interesting. The title is, so it's more self-talk. So you may want to encourage also strategy self-talk. You encourage kids to talk themselves. I know it sounds stupid that you'll be talking to yourselves and there are other people in the house that you can converse with. But if there are shy type kind of learners, they may want to start talking to themselves first before they start talking to others in situations. So a good example would be, I think, I love Kingdom. I'm waiting for Kingdom season 2. I'm not promoting it, but I think lots of kids right now have watched this bloody movie, but interest grow. It's gross, but interestingly gross. All right. So you may want to ask, so like characters, do you agree with what the decision of, I forgot the name of the other guy, that he lied to the prince because he wanted to protect his wife and child, because if he would not follow the instructions of this guy here, the villain, they would kill his family. Do you agree with that? Other ways that you can, you talk about it. So you can ask the parents, as educators, you can ask parents to make ordinary activities at home an English language experience, right? So these are the things that you can do. Develop communicative skills through using English as a medium of interaction. So talk, like simple talks like, Anna, wake up now. It's already 7 o'clock. Please prepare for your first schedule. And yeah, instead of speaking in Filipino or mother tongue, you may want to say, since it's Monday, you decided that Monday would be your English. So parents should also follow what they have discussed and you have agreed on of what language to use on a certain activity of a certain day. All right? Hindi pwede po, sorry, to shift to Filipino, I know it's an English session though, na hindi pwede po nagsabi kayo, nag-agree kayo na today, this hour should be in English and yet the parents would not follow. Remember, one of the support that parents should do is language scaffold or language scaffolding. All right? I know that some parents may have qualms at using English language, a certain activity. What educators can do is provide them with probably a fixed statements. Let's say, what do you say when you ask students to take a bath? May I please go to some of those statements, cliche statements, precast statements, so that they just, are able to support by the utilization of these precast statements on certain language situations and like social contexts. It will help them. A good example, like remember, I give example like snakes and ladders, Monopoly. I remember also my mom asking us to play Scrabble. All right. I think I was in grade 4 when we played Scrabble, and we always had a dictionary beside us, and I was the one who would always come up with made up words, and then all of a sudden my mom would check it on the dictionary and it was actually there, and I didn't know that it's a word, but it sounds like it is a word in English. So it kind of like a eureka moment, and makes children feel that I have something, I'm learning something out of this activity. Expand the learner's proficiency in different skill areas, like when you're cooking, you may want to say, this is a bread, this is how you cook it, or you pour the water gradually, carefully Support it with your hands. Support the bottom of the pitcher so that you will not spill the water, and pour it gradually and gently. So these are some statements that your parents can do. So when teachers come up with activities in their modules or in the online materials, think of activities or examples that are in the house or in the community, not examples that are like if you are a newscaster. And so it's a good activity too, but think first of the things that you're going to come up with an example. Think first at natural activities at home. Next, we have use technology to facilitate peer support learning. Come up with group chats, online platforms where students can orally converse with their classmates or group mates in accomplishing certain activities, collaborative activities, or performance activities for the subject area. And use English. And remember, you must be the administrator so that you can monitor their language use. And of course, finally, we have facilitate learners collaborative out of class project. Like you may want to ask them to incorporate their English language performance tasks to science, that the science is asking them to do an home experiment. So you may want to ask that, okay, you can use that as your performance task, but what I want you to do is you need to speak English all throughout in explaining how the experiment is done, and write your your experiment in your laboratory experiment sheet, and that would also be your writing performance test. So you may want to collaborate your tasks with the other subject area. That would be great. So these are the 3 language learning strategies that promotes independent learning language. So we have adopt. So if students, you think of this year as an experience for students, and observe which you think they like most. That's why I like what Bibal did, is that they came up with modules per quarter, and it's not the whole book. So I think what Vibal can do, and other publishing house, but I don't care about the other publishing house, but Vibal, what the Vibal could do is take or list down the feedback from the family, whether the activities are interesting or not, so that the next edition for the second quarter, they can modify the activities. Now, if you're not subscribing our modules here at Vibal and you created your own modules, do not finish the whole year's module. You may want to listen and enlist the suggestion of the parents, like, I think we cannot adopt the modules and the online materials that you created or wrote or designed is not interesting enough for our students to watch it or to listen to it or read it, and they have not enticed so much. So it could be a feedback to the teachers to modify the activity, the plans they're going to make for the online module, for the online materials, and for the modules. Next would be, if you think some of the activities are not interesting for the kids, replace them. All right. Remember, you want them to use the language. You want your children, you want your students to use English at home. And if the activities you indicated in the book or in the module or in the online material is not interesting, it does not encourage students to use the English language, both oral and written, then replace them. Simple as that. Unlike in the school setup, students have no choice but to follow what the teacher should be doing, because it's a formal way of learning the language. Next, supplement. Now, supplement, as I've been mentioning a while ago, supplement with audio material, supplement with checklists, supplement with audio file, videos, music. All of these files should be supported, created in support to the independent learning of the students. But here's what I'm saying. You cannot have those support if you always do live instruction, all right? So indicate that in a week, teacher support, the teacher live support or live feed or live conferencing will be on a Wednesday. The rest would be pre-recorded videos, pre-recorded audio. At least students would not be subscribing to Wi-Fi connection every day. I'm just saying. Now that's about my discussion on the independent learning. As Marshall would like to discuss a lot like independent learning in listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and viewing. I only have an hour, so probably in the next few sessions in the future, we can have sessions like how to teach independent learning in English, developing listening skills. That will be probably in the future, but this is more of a broad perspective of how we can come up with a program, a design that would help our students develop independent learning of the English language at home. So if you don't have, at this point, I will be entertaining questions. So my moderator, Kia, will be reading, I guess, the questions to me aloud, and I will answer these questions as honest and as well as honest and as best as I can.
Okay po. Hello po, Doc. Hello po.
Oh, hi, Kia.
Hi, Doc. So we have
Hi.
here a few questions from our viewers. Okay
Yes.
po. So, Doc, our first question is from Miss Andrealine de la Vega. Doc,
Andrea Lee, yes.
yes po. Doc, do you suggest parents speaking in Filipino, English, and other dialects, Kapampangan for example, during the formative years?
Again, I did not catch I wasn't able to hear that.
Apo. Doc, do you suggest parents speaking in Filipino, in English, and other dialects such as Kapampangan during the formative years?
Well, it depends, and well, I promote mother tongue based learning of the other languages, though. But it's the choice of the family, what language they want their kids to be exposed early on. It doesn't matter for as long as it's consistent. Like in my case, I was exposed early on to English. Again, my experience of exposure to the language is different from my brothers. And from my brothers, I don't have sisters though. From my brothers, I don't know why my mom had a different experience from me. Probably because I was the youngest, and I think she was more comfortable. And in their workplace, they use English, and I was asked to. That's why my mom would always ask me to. She would always bring me to her meetings, and I would be conversing with their managers who were from abroad, and they would always say that I was cute in speaking in English. The point, ladies and gentlemen, is that it's a choice of the family, whether it's in Kapampangan, whether it's in the vernacular, or whether it's in a foreign language. The choice of the family, for provided that the parents can support the use of the language at home. If you say it's in Kapampangan, then you'll have to ask the members of the family to help the child learn to converse and be proficient, become literate in that language at home. Once they have learned to be literate in that language, it's easy for them to transition that literacy from that language to Filipino and to English. That's my answer. Now, if families would choose, say, English, that's the choice of the family. It cannot be the choice of the whole community. It must be the personal choice of parents in the family. Yeah.
Okay po. Thank you so much po, Doc, for the answer. We have here our second question from Miss Denila Halili. Ayan
All right.
po. Hello po, Doc. In independent homeschooling, do we still need a teacher or tutor to plot the schedule for us parents? We are not very good in understanding the MELCs. Thanks.
All right. In independent schooling, remember there's a huge difference between learning at home and independent homeschooling. Independent homeschooling is that the students are not enrolled in a school, in a formal school, and the parents are the one deciding what students are learning, what's learning at a certain age, what they want, the pace of the learning, and so on and so forth. Now let's focus first on independent homeschooling. Yes, the parents have to enlist the help of tutors. Well, that would be educators so that they can plan out a good learning program for the children. All right, tutors are very important, unless of course the parents are educators themselves. But my point is, you're right. If the parents are not educators, there's a possibility that they will be teaching their children of what they want their kids to learn. It could be even higher, all right? But the point is, after all of the homeschool, independent homeschooling, their children have to take the PEPT. That's a Philippine Education Placement Test. That's based on the K to 12 standards and also the standards of the MLCs. So so that they will not have any problems later on if they choose, if they so choose to help their kids transition from homeschool, independent homeschooling to a formal school later on. They may want to design their independent homeschooling that is aligned already to MLCs. On that point, they need to hire tutors, educators, licensed teachers or experienced teachers to help them come up with the home schedule and plot out the necessary learnings and choose the necessary and not necessary, the most appropriate learning materials or modules for the independent homeschooling of students. Now, if students are homeschooling, if the students are doing learning at home, but while they're home learning at home, meaning they are still enrolled in a formal school, and the parents chose to add on, okay, to add on what the school has provided for their children, then still they don't have to hire a tutor. They need to ask the teacher, the grade level teacher, whether the material they're going to purchase as an add-on to what the school has provided for the students matches with the design of the school. Because the danger of the parents selecting add-on materials, purchasing add-on materials to what the school has provided may go against the philosophy of the school or the design of the school. What will happen is that the students will suffer instead, of doing more good, it will do more harm to them. So that's my answer to that.
Okay po, Doc. Then for our third question for this evening, the question po is from Miss Arlene Luisma Espina. The question
Yes.
po is, I teach in the public school, specifically in senior high school. Do you consider code switching when the students cannot express themselves well in class in full English language?
Well, yes. Remember right now, like code switching is okay, but code mixing is something that we discourage our students to do. Like when they code switch, but you have to be there. Well, the problem is there. You need to remind them that okay, that's acceptable, but you need to rephrase your statements. Probably they do that for lack of for lack of words to express their ideas. So you still allow students to do code switching, but still remind them that they need to consistently use the English language. I think they do that because they don't have enough opportunity to use the English language. Um, I don't know. If here's what I did when I was in with my nieces though and my nephews, I pretend that I do not understand Filipino and I do not understand other languages. For them to be consistently using the English language, they have to think that I don't understand the English language, and therefore they are so careful not to shift to any other language because they know I wouldn't understand. And sometimes they still code mix. Okay, I'm sorry, they code switch. And then I would say, I didn't understand that. Could you please repeat what you said in English? So I'm not saying that you encourage them to code switch, but code switching is an impromptu cognitive situation where you cannot, stop. It happens. You just allow it, but you remind the students that could you please? Yes, I understand. I think the last statement, the latter statement was in a different language. Could you please explain that? Repeat that to me in English. Still be positive in correcting the students or reminding the students, but do not discourage them. But I'm not saying encourage them. Do not say, all right, I will. It's okay for me for you to use to do code mixing or code switching. Now, don't encourage them. But if it happens, again, it happens, we cannot control that. You still ask them to go back to the target language, the use of the target language. All right, that's my answer.
Okay po, Doc Ricky. Then for our last question for
Okay.
tonight, this is from Mr. Ruel Sen.
Okay.
Sir, should the children choose their schedule or is it better to place the hard sciences in the morning since their brains are more focused in the morning? Thank you.
Oh, well, sinasabi nga natin, sorry to shift to Filipino, yung paggawa ng schedule like that schedule, what I do is, binubudol-budol ko na yung bata. You know what? In the morning, your brain is more active. So you may want to choose the most difficult subjects that you have, like math and science, and put that in the morning. So because your brain are so fresh, so it's easy for you to understand difficult concepts. Then those subjects that you like most and easy for you to understand, you put that in the afternoon because your brain is no longer is declining in terms of performance. So you may want to have your easy subjects in the afternoon. You may want to suggest that. You can suggest that, but at the end of the day, it still is the decision of the students, collective decision of the students in a class. But you can still encourage them to have that kind of schedule. But don't put it that your schedule should be science and math in the morning. But you can say, let them come up with a schedule first, right? And like putting them around. I've heard that kids at your age, your mental optimum use of your cognition, wag na magamit ng cognition, of your brain is in its optimum level in the morning, and therefore, if it's in an optimum level, your brain is more predisposed to learning and easily understanding easily science and mathematics, which you consider math, science as difficult subjects. Pwede mo naman mag-suggest. But if they still don't like it, then let them try the schedule for one whole quarter, and the second quarter, go back to the schedule again. Did it work? Let's come up with. Now, if one quarter is too long, you can probably end it with a module. Like say the module that you came up with is good for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, you go back to the schedule. Was the schedule okay with you guys collectively? If not, you may want to rearrange again the subjects according to what you think is, you may want to do a trial and error on the first 2 weeks, the first month of the first quarter. That will be my answer.
Okay po. Thank you so much, Doc Ricky, for answering the queries from our viewers. So for now, that's the questions we will be addressing. The other questions, maybe we could just reply to them through the comment box. And po. So
Okay.
Doc, this is now the time for you to give your final reminders to our viewers before we finally end our session tonight.
All right. Thank you, Kia, for that. So before I end my session, I would like to give my conclusion and implications. So I just wrote it just for us to read. So becoming a good independent learner does not necessarily happen automatically. When engaged in independent learning activities, the learner has to effectively become his or her own tutor. If we consider the role of the tutor delivering a language lesson, we would expect that consideration would be given to issues such as aims and outcomes, suitability of materials and resources, timing, sequence, and feedback in order to maximize the effective learning which could take place in the time available. All right? And the journey through independent language learning, I'm sorry, I already said thank you. Independent learning is a challenging process. There's no one cut deal or panacea or one design that would fit all. So you may want to try out within the quarter what works and doesn't work for the students, all right? With little guidance and the right choice of materials, it can also be highly effective and rewarding too for the students. These principles are intended as a starting point from which learners can explore their own learning style and discover their personal preferences. On that note, I think let's maximize the situation right now by making our students more active learners of the English language and not passive learners during the previous design in in the last year where students listen more. There would be more teacher talk than student performance. So let's now have in this opportunity. There's no more choice but to have students become more active in their learning because they are now on their own, whether they like it or not. They're at home. They'll be on their own automatically. The teachers and the parents are now, whether they like it or not, are reduced to being supporters of their learning of the English language at home. With that being said, thank you very much for your audience, and hopefully I'll see you again on Friday when I talk about teaching comprehension using narrative text. With that, good night and have a good rest.
Okay, there we have it. Thank you so much, Brother Ricky Aguirre, PhD, for this very fruitful session that you had with us tonight. So it's a very good input before we all go to sleep and have a sweet dream. There po. So thank you very much, Doc Ricky, for this session. And of course, to all our Kavibal viewers, thank you so much for your continuous patronage to our Vibal learning sessions. And just like what Doc said a while ago, we'll hope to see you again to our next webinars for this week. Let's stay tuned to our Vibal Facebook page for the various webinars we will still be having this Thursday, Friday, and of course, Saturday. So thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you again next time. Good night and God bless.
God bless.